Debating, interviewing. You know that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all Ruby up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Chris. What's up?
I don't know. It's another week. January's over.
Dude,
I don't know how this happens.
it's been a January, that's for damn sure.
Yeah, sure has. Well, let's just jump in. We've got Stephen Margheim on the show today. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
We just want to chat about your specialty, which is Ruby and SQLite. Right?
Perfect.
When did you start working on all the SQLite stuff? That has become your thing over the past couple years or something.
Yeah, I first started working on it at work maybe 2.5 years ago. I needed to spin up a new application at work, sort of test the waters for a new business vertical. And I was the only developer on it, sort of an R&D project. So I wanted to keep the stack really minimal so I could move quickly, and just sort of tried out SQLite as an experiment and loved the developer experience so much that I was willing to roll up my sleeves and try to make the Rails experience better in these various pain points I was hitting so that I could keep that same developer experience. So I probably started working with Rails fixes about 1.5 years ago or so.
Yeah, because I think that's when you started getting famous in the Rails world for the SQLite stuff. Since the day that I started using Rails, it was a warning in the guides for as long as I can remember. That was, don't use SQLite. It's not for production. And it used to be a pain in the ass to install too, because it wasn't that long ago. I wanted to use SQLite for something. Oh, I wanted to support SQLite in Pay or Noticed or something. And the latest version of Ubuntu LTS, which CI runs, we have to, apt install SQLite. Well, it turns out their version that is officially supported by Ubuntu is one version, maybe two minor versions behind the JSON support. So I get it all working locally because I brew install SQLite and there's JSON and it all works. And I push it up to CI and it's, Ubuntu does not support that yet. I got to wait 2 years for the next SQLite release. So then that was another nail in the coffin for me for bothering to support SQLite. And it's totally different today, where it's like the SQLite gem comes with the latest version pre-compiled for you. So you can never have to worry about versions, which is incredible on its own. You fixed a bunch of things that were also things that you would immediately hit in Rails. This record's locked or whatever, and that was it. Okay, well, this is why they warned me that it wasn't production ready. And it wasn't actually because of SQLite necessarily. It was more the adapter. So
yeah, there were a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies. Early on, when I just started looking, one of the first things that genuinely surprised me, because we use Rails and we know the Rails core team is basically like the best Rails developers in the entire world, and they're also making Rails better. And you just sort of presume that it is as good as it could possibly be. And I remember early on looking around and being jealous at generated columns in Postgres. Man, Postgres is so cool.
Yeah.
It has all these cool features, JSON support and generated columns. And when Rails released that feature, that's so awesome. And you go and look, wait a minute, SQLite has supported this for 8 years. Rails supports this, SQLite supports this, but the SQLite adapter in Rails doesn't support this. Someone just has to write the glue code to make this thing work. And I just start picking up rocks, and Rails has this feature, SQLite has this feature, but the Rails adapter for SQLite doesn't. And there were 6 of those. So just taking the time to look and then to just bring these patterns over from the Postgres adapter or the MySQL adapter and allow Rails to really leverage the power of SQLite, and then to really just understand the complexities of working with a embedded database instead of a client server database and how to remove some of those core pain points where, yeah, if anyone who tried it out, I'm certain that you saw databases locked there. So you're like, well, now I know why they say don't use it in production. And once you unlock those things, you come to realize, there are a lot of pros here. Of course, it doesn't work for every single applications for every single use case, but it really is production ready. And there are many more applications that would do really well with just vanilla Rails and vanilla SQLite than we imagine.
Yeah. There was so many little things like generated columns I remember running into. There was another one that's, I think the PR is still open or something. If you do like an insert all or update all or something, you can have Postgres return the IDs or whatever. I think there's a PR. Actually, Andrew, I think the PR issue originally came from Jamie from something that you guys were doing. I know he was in the thread or whatever, but it's funny because the way that things work, which you assume the core team is all knowledgeable, they assume that they are because we look up to them and they've done all this amazing work already. But reality is GitHub uses MySQL in production. So they're maintaining those specific things. Probably a company of that scale is going to need databases that are not single files. So it has natural neglect, but it's also one of those cool things that if you pick up a new feature or a very unused feature, the opportunities to contribute to Rails are often kind of low-hanging fruit if you're looking for that, which is funny because sometimes the assumption you make is they probably already know what's best. But as it turns out, you have to question those assumptions and dig in, and you start to realize, oh, we could make this way better. And then you got kind of the support from DHH and 37 Signals with Kamal and their once products, which really made the look back into this being like, actually, this does deserve a lot more updates and modernizing, because back in the day, yeah, maybe we didn't care so much or whatever, but here we are. You started with APR probably, and then built up sort of that momentum on contributions and stuff, and your expertise became clear as you're learning it. But here we go. What was like one of the first PRs you made?
The whole process started off through complete luck. Let me just start there. I started writing about SQLite. I sort of wanted to reboot my blog. And so I gave myself the challenge of, I'm just going to write every day for a week. And I was writing about SQLite. That's what I was working with at the time, and getting some feedback from people. And that led me to starting a post to figure out how to control the compilation flags for SQLite. And I couldn't quite get it to work. So I opened an issue on the SQLite 3 Ruby gem. And within like an hour, I think, Mike DeLessio responds in GitHub and he's like, hey, I'm not quite following, but this sounds like something that we should get fixed. Do you want to hop on a call and show me what's going on? And I can see if I can understand it better. Maybe we can fix it. I'm like, sure. I don't know Mike from Adam at this point, so I have no idea like how valuable his time is at that time, but sure. So we hop on a call. I show him what's going on. We get on the same page. He's okay. I understand the problem. I think that this is an easy feature I can add. We can expose the compilation flags through the bundle config. I can pipe them in, and let me noodle on this. I'll open a PR and I'll ping you on it. I think he opens the PR a day later, 2 days later, a super fast turnaround. And so I write a post on that and we just start chatting. And I told him, yeah, I've been looking into this more, writing about it. I've noticed some of these gaps. SQLite supports it. Rails supports it for Postgres and MySQL, but the adapter for SQLite and Rails doesn't support it. And I've been thinking about just trying to port those features over. He's like, that's a great idea. You should do it. Also, I am one of the managers of this team at Shopify. And so I will make sure that someone reviews your pull requests. And looking back, I now see like this is a major hurdle and completely just luck that I was able to get reviewers. It's just really hard to get reviewers. There's basically always 700 pull requests open. It's crazy, the activity. The very first one, I tried to start easy. So my very first pull request I opened was allowing the default functions you can define in your migrations to use the double pipe concatenation operator. Rails just has a allow list of different functions you can use, and it wasn't in there. So I added it. And that led into, going back to what you just mentioned, allowing the SQLite adapter to take those returning column keywords in insert all statements. So that was the second PR. And that was the foundation to allow you to do generated columns, because the way that Rails hydrates the values for those generated columns in your active record instances is by adding them to the returning to statement implicitly for you, so that the database gives you back the values that it generated. And then Rails pipes that through its type coercions. And so when you create something with generated columns defined, you actually get the values in your active record instance immediately. So that was then the third PR. And so they just started stacking on top of each other. And once you get a few in and you earn a few bona fides, it gets a little bit easier to get reviewers. And the more you do them, the more you get a sense of how to do them well. But yeah, it just sort of started literally with opening an issue on the SQLite gem to say, hey, can we do compilation flags? And it spiraled.
That's awesome. That's a cool story, because Mike is awesome and we're lucky to have him in the community. And that's a great way where you found low-hanging fruit that wasn't some, because I think some people will try to start with like, let's go make this major change. And that's when those things have to get shot down, because the thing about the big changes is, what are the implications? And somebody on the maintainer list has to think about every single possibility of what this will affect. That's pretty hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that's what Raphael does, which is so tough. That's a really hard job. But instead, you can go like small things. I'm pretty sure I ran into that at one point where the concatenation, we were using the name of person gem from Basecamp, which has a separate first name and last name column. But I wanted to have a combo box search and hit the full name, because obviously. And how do I do this? I got to make another regular string column and then before save or something, concatenate myself in Ruby and duplicate the data, which doesn't sound great. And then I learned about the virtual columns, concatenating in SQL and whatever. And that was pretty awesome. But you quickly run into like, oh, Rails doesn't support this. It probably should. But that's awesome to hear that story. So yeah, you actually made the, what was it? The enhanced SQLite adapter library was like a collection of everything. Did a lot of those things get into Rails?
Everything got into Rails. Minus, there's two sort of features that would never get added to Rails. Probably one of them I'm still trying to think about maybe how to get there. But the core idea for that gem was basically to backport features down to 7.0, because some got released in 7.1, some in 7.2, many of them in 8.0. So regardless of where you were at from 7.0 to 8.0, you could have the full suite of features. You could do returning columns, but also to serve as a proving grounds for features that I was building out to get into Rails 8. So the big two features in Rails 8, like solving the database deadlocks, were to really, at the very foundational layers, get the way that Ruby and Rails work with SQLite as an embedded database, to treat it and see it properly as I/O. Fundamentally, that was the problem. Like, because it's embedded, the handoff was not really seen by Ruby as I/O. And so that thread would hold the GVL even while no Ruby code is executing, and SQLite is just doing its thing. And if you got a connection pool and multiple threads, you get contention and it can sort of spiral and pushes your long tail latency, and you just start getting a lot of errors as well. So sort of proving out those solutions. The only two features that are presently in there that aren't in Rails are allowing you to load extensions through your database YAML file. There are a handful of SQLite extensions that are published on Ruby gems as gems, but not many. If you really want the full power of SQLite extensions, you can use the SQL package, SQL PKG gem, which wraps up a Go executable, which has a library of over 100 SQLite extensions, and you can install them. And that gem provides that same functionality. So you can list in your database YAML, I want to add this extension to my cache database. I want to add that extension to my primary database. And then the other feature, which is experimental, was I was exploring separating read and write database connection pools. This is the one bottleneck that you can still hit. Rails's connection pool doesn't distinguish between read and write operations. And so if you have high write throughput, even though SQLite can do reads, as many reads as you need in parallel to the one write that it allows, if your Rails connection pool gets saturated with write operations, the reads just have to wait on those writes at the level of Rails. So in an ideal world, at the Rails layer, reads would have a direct connection to the database always that is never blocked by write operations. So I was doing some hacking there. So there's that feature. I'd have to really sharpen that up to get that into Rails, and it would require very many low-level changes to Rails to support that level of fine-grained distinctions. But aside from that, everything made it into Rails 8. It was very exciting. Came down to the last minute. Some of them I was like, oh no, are they going to make it? But Rails 8 is truly the first fully production-ready SQLite compatible web application framework. You can just run Rails new and Kamal deploy, and you will not run into any of the classic problems that everyone runs into.
That is super awesome. It's kind of like when Mongo came out and it was, you don't have to run migrations. You can just play around with your data structures and figure it out. Feel similar about SQLite. I don't have to run a server. I don't have to manage the configuration for that and usernames and passwords and whatever. SQLite has that same ease of use. You run it and you're done. You don't have to worry about this separate thing running as a service and restarting it when it crashes or backing it up and yada, yada. It is got those same qualities that make it just Rails new is actually just about Rails and not Rails plus your database, which is definitely a time sink when you're setting it up for the first time, because you're like, what is Homebrew? I set up brew install Postgres 5 years ago. What is my username and password? And what's the IP address and whatever when you're in production? And that is kind of magically a non-issue with SQLite, which is great.
Yeah, I really strongly believe that one of the most important factors to Rails' success, and also genuinely the success of the internet and the internet economy, was the fact that Rails with Heroku's free plan put so much power in the hands of individual builders to get up and running incredibly quickly and to iterate and to be reactive and responsive to the feedback of their users. And as soon as Heroku removed their free plan, it really, I think, radically shifted the sort of lay of the land for people to get started. And it's one of the things that I am passionate about, is bringing back those kinds of opportunities to allow just individuals, like Rails is the one-person framework, to get up and running as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, but as high quality as possible. It's not about shipping AI slop. It's about being an artisan, but not having all of these barriers. And that's something that I really love about SQLite, as you were saying. It just removes so many barriers to entry. You don't have to learn about how two computers talk to each other over network protocols. You can just sort of build.
Honeybadger helps you deploy with confidence and be your team's DevOps hero by combining error, uptime, and performance monitoring in one simple platform. It's free to get started, and setup just takes a few minutes. Be the hero your team needs. Suit up at honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io. It's one of those traps we all fall into of the complexity. It's just so easy to add complexity. And it just becomes so refreshing to be like, yeah, you want to back up your database? Copy, paste. You backed up your SQLite database. That's it. No searching for the tutorial of the PG dump command and blah, blah, blah. All the flags you got to remember for that, or downloading Table Plus or something, going through its setup and all that. It's one where it's truly simple. Anyone can do it. And it gives so much power to people who are like brand new, don't know what they're doing, but are excited to go try and build a product or something. And most people will give up in those weeds. And that's just such a shame. But it really makes for a great experience when you can pull it off. And sometimes you have to come revisit that many times over the years, as we did with Webpacker and JS bundling and even sprockets and prop shaft. Do we need all this complexity? Should the default be import maps now that browsers support them? Makes a lot of sense. It's cool. So you've got an upcoming course coming out on Rails and SQLite with our friends Steve and Aaron Francis, Steve Tenuto. How did all that come together?
That has been such a cool adventure. Aaron reached out to me when he was working on his SQLite course that he released last year. And we did one episode of his Database School podcast and just got along really well. And he, pretty sure it was him who broached the question. I honestly don't recall at this moment. He's like, hey, I'm just curious. Do you have any sort of ideas? We're considering maybe doing a guest course, and do you have any ideas? Boy, do I. Because I've been thinking about this for a while, but I just don't have the skills accrued at this moment to do the level of quality that I would have to do it. I just can't ship slop. It's incompatible. And so I gave him my thoughts. I really want to show people the possibilities, how much you can do and how simple it really can be by just leaning on the power of nothing but vanilla Rails and vanilla SQLite. And he was like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. So I flew over to the US and spent a week in Dallas filming in his studio. It was pretty fun, but pretty intense week. I think I averaged 12 videos a day for 4 straight days. And we banged it out, but I'm so excited about it. Find it at highleveragerrails.com. It is my attempt to bring the next generation of Rails developers to the table and to show them that if you have the energy and the interest to get into web development, to get into Rails, to get into building on the web platform, but you don't have a decade of experience and you don't already feel comfortable with orchestrating a cluster of machines running 5 different services in 3 different configurations, you can still do high quality work that is worth money, work that you can stand behind without having to spend years mastering all of these tools. You don't have to go and learn Docker. You don't have to go and learn Kubernetes. You don't have to go and master 8 different tools. How do I configure Redis in 3 different ways for 3 different use cases? You can start, and 1 week later, you can be in production, and you can feel confident that you understand what your code is doing. You can feel confident that you can evolve and iterate that system over time in response to your users. And I really hope that it's a bit of a counterweight to some of the starter kit love. Starter kits are nice, you own the thing. So you do need to understand what the code is doing. And the same with AI. Like AI is useful. But if you just say, AI, write me an app and put it on the internet, and then your users are like, hey, it'd be really nice if it did this, that, and the other. Uh-oh, I've never actually read this code. I barely know what it does. You're not setting yourself up for long-term success. So where can we find the leverage to allow us to move quickly, to keep our capital costs low, but to also recognize that real value requires actual quality? Learn high leverage tools, Rails and SQLite, and apply your craft and put something that you are happy to stand behind out into the world. So that is the high leverage Rails course. I'm so excited to do it. I could not have done it without Aaron and Steve. And it is going to be awesome and such higher quality than I could have ever done on my own.
Those are really good collabs to do because they've put a ton of time into production, animating the After Effects intro course and outro stuff. Even that is a lot of work to do yourself. And if you got to learn it, buy a template or something and hack it together and blah, blah, blah. It just gets done so much better by the pros. So Steve sent me the trailer or something and I was, dang, this is good. Good music, good beat and everything to it. Just great intro. You can immediately tell the quality and effort put into it from that 30, 60-second thing. And you're like, okay, this course is going to be good. So I'm looking forward to it. When's it come out? February?
Yeah,
sometime?
middle of February. So the exact date still in progress as we are editing. So all the videos are shot, like it is completed, but still editing each of the videos, but sometime around Valentine's Day. So if you have that special someone in your life, what says love like a license to high leverage Rails? I think
love
that's
it.
a wonderful Valentine's Day gift.
That's super good. What do you build in here? It looks like there's posts, controllers and models and comments, and tags.
It's like a Hacker News Lobsters style clone. So very content centric, not e-commerce, not stepping on any other course toes.
Yeah, weird.
But the app itself is Lobster style clone. It's very much not the focus. The focus is on Rails itself and SQLite and what you can do. So like, okay, let's think about how we would add tagging, but we're going to dig into, all right, what's a practical use case for SQLite's JSON support? And let's think through the real sort of complexities here. How do we make this robust? How do we make this usable? Same with search. So we sort of just use that as a consistent, concrete playground to walk ourselves through really what these tools do. So yeah, we're going to install Solid Cache, we're going to install Solid Cable, but we're not just going to stop there. But we're also not going to spend all of our time. Like, I'm not here to teach you how to build a Lobsters clone. That's not particularly valuable. What's valuable is how do you think through problems? How do you understand the power given to you by these tools and how to combine them in ways that gives you leverage, right? That gives you the ability to generate value for less effort than you put in, right? This is the crux of the economy. Right? This is everything. So I really hope that people don't get too hung up and try to go make content-centric Lobsters apps, but that they take away and appreciate the focus on the thought process of how you can combine these Lego bricks together in a way that is incredibly simple and fast. It's a 5-minute video on tagging system, and it's very flexible and very powerful. And the same with search and anything else. And also getting a sense for how you would actually make use of these new tools enabled by Rails 8 and how to take the power given to you by Rails 8 with SQLite, with the solid suite of gems, and bring it to bear to whatever you might dream up.
I'm excited for this. One thing that I was going to ask about that you mentioned was the tagging of posts. That's a really good example that I was guilty of this. You bundle add acts as taggable on, and they've figured out the schema for me. I don't have to worry about it and just use that library. But that's not how you build good software, not how you learn how to maintain software and stuff. That is a feature I just grabbed and put zero thought into, assumed that they knew what they were doing. And unfortunately, that means that they had to build a generic solution that isn't actually necessarily the optimal solution for my application, because I probably don't need 30 features that they offer, and I just need these handful of things for myself. And that's all I'm going to ever need in this app or whatever. I really appreciate that, because when people are learning, it can be tough to stop. Okay, what does SQLite give me? What does Postgres give me? What are my tools that are available? You're often too quick to hit Google search how to add tags to whatever in Rails, and the tutorials or AI is going to give you whatever the most popular thing is, which is probably the gem, which isn't necessarily ever the right answer for your application. And if you're trying to really build stuff and really learn it, this is the way to go. That's how you learn it. You understand the decisions and the trade-offs and the capabilities of the tools you've got. Really think that'll be a great thing. This stuff is the content I wish I had back when I was learning 15 years ago or whatever, because that is so powerful, but also people seem to have forgotten that. If you look at any JavaScript applications and the million dependencies that they import, it's kind of wild how different the philosophies are.
Yeah. I want to find more better ways to communicate this as well. I think it's directly connected to a healthy use of AI as well, because in an ideal world, I think, or at least in my ideal world, I think that AI opens up so many more possibilities to feel confident at the idea of rolling your own. And I really do genuinely believe that that's very healthy for application or for any kind of software system. At the end of the day, I'm responsible for the software either way. So it's much better if I understand how it works, because when something goes wrong, that means it takes me less time with less stress to fix it. And making sure that I understand what's being used is central. And one of the easiest ways to understand it is to have written it. But as you say, so many dependencies, because of their nature, like they have to be configuration forward, not convention forward, right? They have to have, here's 1,000 knobs, and the total number of configurable states is larger than the atoms in the known universe. Complexity gets out of hand really quickly. But with AI, you could be like, hey, let's explore this space together. Like, I don't have to know every single detail before I start creating anything. But it is so important that you don't just say, hey, AI, give me a tagging system. And you never really take the time to be like, what is this? What is the SQL query here? What's this operator? What is happening here? Let's talk to the trade-offs. Why would I put it in a JSON column on the table versus splitting it out into a second table? Where might I start feeling pain? Am I going to need to have this feature or that feature? Are they going to be harder or easier? Interrogate the software, but lean into the possibilities that you can ask AI, hey, help me build out a tagging feature. It doesn't need to be scary. It doesn't need to be intimidating, but just go into it with eyes open, knowing that at the end of the day, you're responsible for it. So understand what it's doing. And when you put those two things together, I think that we could have a really bright and beautiful future for builders on the web to craft high quality stuff. Unfortunately, so much of what I see on the internet today of people being like, look, I typed 5 words into a prompt box and got a whole application out. Cool, I guess, but good luck 1 week from now. So
yeah,
hopefully we can start to turn the tides a little bit there to bring back a sense of responsibility and craft, but also to lean into, yeah, you don't have to bring in 1,000 dependencies. AI does make us more effective and efficient. And marry those two things together and get back that leverage to have well-tailored software for your problems that you understand and you can work in with confidence and with speed.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing that AI is tailored to kind of give you and so is search, to give you the most popular result. So when you search for something, you're going to get whatever the blog post that it has the best SEO or whatever. AI at least can help a little bit more, where you can ask it further questions. So you could be like, how do I add tags to a record in Rails? Start with just Rails. Is there anything that I could do in pure SQLite? Do I need a dependency? And you could like interact with that and talk to it more to fine tune what you're actually looking for. If you haven't spent a ton of time learning SQL, because the other thing too is you can learn SQL, but you're learning sort of the generic SQL that is going to work roughly with SQLite or MySQL or Postgres. But really, if you know which database you're going to use, you want to find and tailor your solutions to that database. And maybe you have to build something generic like a gem that needs to run on any SQL style database. But if you are shipping your product to production, it's another one of those things that you should understand the tools and their capabilities as best you can, because you can take advantage of that stuff. I'm hoping that in the future that makes it a lot easier to be able to like interrogate AI and drill down to those solutions, because I don't feel like that was really ever that possible with plain old search on the web. Like you had to continue refining your search constantly to maybe stumble upon some weird esoteric blog post that wasn't popular or whatever that really had the actual answer you were looking for. Who knows? But
And also,
crossed.
the first 10 results are ads. So
yeah.
good luck.
Can't forget that.
Sponsored content, bro.
What if we start getting sponsored AI results? It's a matter of time.
Dude, some company yesterday tried to put me onto the idea that I should pay them $7.99 a month for search without ads. Is this really what we're coming to? We're going to charge you a subscription not to see an ad. And I was like, well, I guess we finally made it to web browsers. It worked its way through the entertainment industry, dude. And now here we are, your web browser. Subscribe to Google.
Yeah, the internet is weird and changing a lot lately. I feel like the base level of quality in our tools that we have these days has gotten so good that SQLite can do an insane amount of stuff for what seems to be just a file on disk. It's a lot more than that, but it's crazy where you're like, you can do all this and pretty darn good performance. I forget what some of the numbers were for people testing Campfire, because they were like, it's on SQLite. There's no way you can have more than 2 people chatting. Stephen, you might remember some of those numbers or something.
They had 50,000 concurrent users when they put it on their dedicated hardware.
Dang. And that's like with Action Cable running in Ruby.
Yeah.
That was one of the bottlenecks, I feel like, is more than the database, the WebSocket processing of just parallel connections and all that, which I'm pretty sure Vlad did rip out Action Cable and put any cable in there, and it was way better.
Way faster. Yeah. This is one of the major myths. I talked about this in my Rails World talk that has its origins in reality. It's not a fabrication, but there is this sense that, okay, sure, SQLite is nice. Sure, SQLite has most of the SQL features, but come on, I'm building a business on the internet. There's 6 billion people on the internet. This will never work.
Just as like use React for that, right?
Yeah. It's worth reminding people that there are maybe 50 companies in the entire universe who will ever need more than 50,000 concurrent users.
Yeah.
I think we get lost in the numbers sometime, but as a reminder, it's incredibly rare, actually, and you can make a very healthy living at 50,000 concurrent users, and that is nowhere near the headroom of a fully optimized stack.
Yeah, it's funny because it's I don't know, just our humanness. We're terrible at lots of things with numbers as humans, and it's big number, more better. It's like, yeah, maybe, but what is the actual purpose? And you almost need to be a little bit naive about it, where you're like, I just need to get customers. That's the users, period. That's the goal. I need to do marketing. I need to do acquisition and distribution and blah, blah, blah. And we're just super focused on, well, we built it, it works, but it works to what extent? And you're not really ever going to get a perfectly concrete answer of, this is exactly the number of users that it will support. And does that even matter? No, almost not. The issue is actually getting that into people's hands that actually want to use it every day.
Yeah,
But
this is one of my favorite things I love from David's keynote at Rails World. But what if I have runaway success and I become the next TikTok? Yeah, so you'll be a billionaire. You could literally just go find the 10 smartest experts in this one field, pay them exorbitant amounts of money such that they could never say no, and say, like, solve this problem for me in the next year. And then you can become 10 times more of a billionaire. I think he said,
And-
like, what am I going to do? Cry on my private island? Yeah.
It's the crying with money, wiping your tears away meme. But even if you are successful and do run into scaling issues, if people really want your product, they will deal with that. They will wait. It's not like a competitor is going to come in and just overnight replace all of your users. Twitter was fine when they had fail whales all the time. GitHub's been down a bunch of times. People still use GitHub, I think. I've heard
Notion
a few
is still
do.
slow. People still use Notion.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them, but they're out there.
The scaling thing is usually, it's a fixable problem, guaranteed no matter what. You might have to swap out some things here or there, whatever, change the way it works. And it might be painful in the moment because you're stressed, because production's down and blah, blah, blah. But that's one of those really good problems to have that almost nobody has. That's why these big companies have so many engineers. There are lots of interesting, weird edge cases to do at scale, but you got to get to scale at some point first. And this is what it's all about. Really, if you're building a product, you want engineering to be the smallest part of the effort. Ideally, we could just ask bolt.new to generate the app for us, and then we market it and stuff. But no, that's not really the case. And there are so many little decisions to make along the way that we didn't even get to make, which is why the product sucks and is very generic and whatever. That's the humanness you got to put into it, which is what I really appreciate about Hey Calendar being so different than a Google Calendar and whatever. If you got to do engineering work, that's how you should be doing it. Get the product into people's hands, make it unique, make it special, and focus on that, not these performance numbers and whatever. But it's a hard thing to get over as human beings, I guess.
Yeah, especially engineers. It's part of why I wanted to title the course High Leverage Rails, is to try to recenter the concept of leverage. I think it's our natural inclination, the engineering mind, to be drawn towards solving problems with perfection. And perfection is an asymptote. You can just approach it. And oftentimes the diminishing returns happen way earlier than you might expect. And so centering the concept of leverage, where can I apply less effort than the value I get out? Because at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to. Burnout, in some ways, is like an inverse of leverage. You're putting in more effort than the value you get out. It's unsustainable for any system, for any person. We have to be thinking about leverage. And yeah, I like solving problems really, really neatly and as close to perfect as possible, as like any other engineer. But I keep myself sane and employed by focusing on leverage. Where can I exert effort and get more value out than the effort I put in? And I think engineering and any engineer would improve their career and their mental health and so many other things if they focus less on how close to perfect am I and more on have I maximized the leverage available to me.
I feel like I really needed to hear that right now. Bro, I feel called out and spoken to and heard all at the same time.
I think that's what he was aiming for.
It's really good advice.
Peace be upon you, brother.
Yeah, dude. I might have to go sit outside after this and think about stuff.
I was going to say the leverage in the title really stood out to me. And then for when you do hit the scale, you have high performance SQLite as the other course to buy. So you can do your scaling performance stuff with that when you need it.
Exactly.
Thought that was funny. It's perfect. It's kind of sad when you like look at Hacker News and stuff. The reason why I got attracted to Rails is look at the leverage you get as one person or two people or three people who can go build GitHub in Ruby and Rails. That's nuts. To have three people be able to start something like that and get it to the capabilities they had to do back then, that was hard.
The concepts they created from whole cloth and then encoded in software. Yeah.
It was crazy. But yeah, if you got to go grind your stones into round circles and make wheels from scratch and whatever, like you're not going to get there. You spend all your time making the perfect tire or something. It's like, well, the rest of the car sucks, but the skateboard's got some pretty sweet F1 tires on it. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. I think that's what kind of the philosophy of sort of the community of Rails is all about. Most of the people who I've heard like, oh, I don't use Rails anymore. I went to Elixir, Crystal, or Go, or Rust because it's faster. Cool. Great. If your problem actually needed that, then great. That is a really good reason to go somewhere else. But chances are the general product sort of human rules and business logic and whatever, that's probably best expressed in Ruby and whatever else, because it's going to need to change a lot and whatever. It's decision making doesn't need to be extremely, extremely fast or whatever. And you can extract it if it does need to be, but it's one of those things that leverage helps as a term, really helps convey like what is important here. And I think a lot of people just don't even stop and think what is important, because it's kind of fun to go down the rabbit hole of performance here or there, but it's a rabbit hole. Sure can be. Well, gentlemen, anything else before we run out of time here?
I'm excited to read this. Just listening, I'm like, this sounds exactly like something I need in my life right now. So excited.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. And special thanks to Chris for sponsoring the course.
I might be biased, but we are kind of one of the hosting services with Hatchbox that actually can support SQLite out of the box, because we're not running in Docker containers and all that jazz. Some of them do have the ability to mount a persistent disk, but yeah, we were happy to support because for one, just it's an awesome course, but with Hatchbox, they're kind of in a unique spot to be able to support SQLite apps and all that.
Yeah. And before I recorded the whole course and did everything last year, the course goes through step by step how to deploy your app on Hatchbox, because it is the best way to deploy SQLite on Rails applications, hands down. And so it was so cool to see after the fact that Aaron reached out to you and the connection worked out, because I'm such a big fan of Hatchbox specifically for these kinds of applications. There really is no better solution out there. It gives you so much leverage. So I was super excited to see that Aaron did that without even telling me. So I saw it in the announcement video. I was like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. I reached out to you.
I love it. It was a surprise for you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool because the way our stuff sets up is like, hey, it's your server. You can do whatever you want with it. So it's one of those things that aligns a lot. That is your leverage. You don't have to play in our sandbox with our rules. It's your server. We're going to go help you do whatever you need to do, whatever you want to do. I have Hatchbox running on a Raspberry Pi, just running some random apps at home. Good luck convincing Roku or Render or Fly to let you configure a server at home. You're not going to do that. So it's pretty cool. It's a good collaboration. I haven't got to see the course yet, so I'm excited to go through it and everything and see how it all goes. Looking forward to it.
Me too. Mid-February, highleverageRails.com. It's my radio voice.
When did you start recording it? I guess, when did you start planning it? Because the recording was fast, but that seems like a lot of prep.
We decided to do it sprint style. So I prepped it in 1 month and recorded it in 4 days.
Dang, that's impressive. I'm in the middle of doing our Learn Hotwire course, and I'm like, this might take 3 months. It is probably a fair bit more details on all the weird edge case things to do in Hotwire, but I would much prefer to do that. Plan it all, record it in 4 days, get it edited, published. That's impressive. Excited to see it.
It was a hectic month, but I think totally worth it. And I'm excited for everyone to see it whenever it comes out in mid-February.
Well, we'll have a link to it in the show notes. Yeah. Anything else? All righty. Well, I will talk to you, gentlemen, hopefully at a conference soon. I miss you all.
Yeah, I'll see you in Brazil.
Sin City Ruby.
That's right. Yeah. And then Sin City Ruby right after. That's going to be good, April.
Can't
all
wait.
Right. Catch you all later.
Peace.
Bye.